Okay, to begin, we're going to start with 3 strands of 561, and we're going to outline each window in our little cabin. So for these ones down here, I'm going to just do some straight stitches for each line that appears on each of these first story windows or lower windows. And you can kind of work in like a back stitch type motion. And then make sure you get the interior bar as well. And then I'm going to repeat that for this window. Now you're going to come in and also do these 3 little round windows. So for these, I like to start with the 2 interior bars when I work on a window. So that's just going to be a straight stitch across and then a straight stitch over the vertically as well. Can't talk. And then you're just going to back stitch all the way around the window. I like to try to fit in 2 stitches between each kind of where the 2 bars are. So like from here to here, from here to here, I'm going to try to get 2 stitches in there. That stitch length works pretty well for this tiny circular shape, and you'll get a nice rounded circle if you fit in as many little stitches as you can. You could even go smaller than that if you wanted to. So I'm stitching all the way around in back stitch. I will repeat this on the other 2 windows here until I have all of these done, and then you're also going to come up here and do a straight stitch for each bar in this top window. Once you're done with that, you can tie off and we'll move on to the next step. Okay, next you're going to take 3 strands of your red 8/16, and we're going to fill in the door with a horizontal satin stitch. Sometimes when I do satin stitch, I like to start off with a little teensy tiny straight stitch that's going to get completely covered up. And what this does is it gets the knot on the back side of the fabric out of our way. So now I can start my satin stitch down here, and I'm never going to be running into the knot as I come up through the fabric each time on this side. So for satin stitch, you're going to come up through the fabric on one edge of the door, and you're going to go right back down the fabric across from that and pull. Now you're going to come back up through the fabric right next to your first stitch. So I'm using the line of the door to tell me where to come up through the fabric, and I'm just going to come up right above where I came up that first time. And I'm going to go down right across. Here's where I went down last time, that hole. I'm just going to take my needle, move it ever so slightly over, and push it down and pull. I'm going to go back over here, come up through the fabric just a teensy bit above that last stitch. I like to sometimes just put my needle in the hole that I made from the last stitch, move it up ever so slightly, and then pull down. And we're going to continue like this until we have this whole door filled in. So with satin stitch, be sure to always come up on the same side of the area that you're filling each time. It just helps keep your stitches tighter, and I just find it easier to keep everything in alignment when I'm doing that. So I'll go ahead and I'll get this whole door filled in, and then I'll show you what's next. Now with 3 strands of ecru, you're just real quick going to outline this door frame with a back stitch. So I'm just basically going to outline all the way around. You don't need to do across the base because we're going to cover that later, but you can just go up, over, and then down. So for back stitch, after you make that first initial straight stitch, each time you're just going to come up a stitch length away from your previous down stitch, or actually, sorry, from your previous stitch. Lost my needle. And then you're going to make your down stitch through the same hole of your previous stitch. Come up a stitch length away, go back down through the same hole. Come up a stitch length away, go back down through this hole. And now I will go across the top here. And then back down this side. So get that door outlined, and then we're going to move on to this lower half siding. So we're going to fill in the whole lower half siding, so from the bottom of the house up to this section right here, with a back split stitch. And you're going to be working with the color 9 and just 3 strands. So for a back split stitch, what you're going to want to do is start off again with just a little straight stitch going out. That's like your starter stitch. And just like you're going to do back stitch, you're going to come up a stitch length away. But instead of going back down through this hole right here, like you would in back stitch, you're going to go about halfway through the middle of this previous stitch, and you're going to go, you're going to go straight through those threads, splitting them as you make your down stitch. Hence the name back split stitch. Come up a stitch length away. And I'm going to go back down about midway through the length of this stitch, splitting those stitches down the middle. And I'll do one more right here and go back down midway through, splitting that last stitch through the middle and going straight through those threads. Now I'm going to do the same thing. I'm just going to do it right next to my first column of stitches. So I'm coming up right here, going to do a little back stitch. Now I'll come up a stitch length away. And split that last stitch down the middle to make my down stitch. Come up a stitch length away. Split that last stitch down the middle. And then come up a stitch length away. And go back through here. And you're just going to continue like that, working up and down the length of this siding. And when you get to here, you're just going to need to go underneath the window. And then for this part, you could probably just do more of a satin stitch to get this filled in rather than trying to fill in 2 stitch lengths. So this will probably just be a little bit more of a satin stitch. Anyways, then you'll fill all the way to here, and then you'll go all the way across over here, fill in above and below the window, and then finish filling it over here with back split stitch. Just wanted to show you for right here where it gets really tiny, right above the window, I'm not really doing a split stitch anymore. I'm just really filling this in with more of a satin stitch for everything that is above this window here. So that's just going to be more like a satin stitch like this. But then everything else I should be able to get the back split stitch texture into. So underneath here it's a little bit bigger, so I can probably fit in, you know, 2 stitches like I'll show you right here. a stitch here, and then a stitch here, and I would just continue that all the way across underneath this window. And then obviously once it lengthens back out over here, you can continue with your full column of back split stitch. You're also going to want to fill in this top section with back split stitch as well. So usually where I like to start with this is just right at the tippy top of this triangular point right here, and then fill down to this window. And for this part, you can kind of just do some more of a satin stitch. Again, we're still using 3 strands of 9 here. And I'm going to fill in on either side of that initial stitch that I made. Hopefully that lighting is a little bit better. It's the end of the day here, so I'm losing light. I'm going to come back in over on this side and fill in over here. So again, I know I said back split stitch, but for above and below the window, you're going to be kind of working with just more of a satin stitch, just because it's such a tiny space. So now that I can get to the side of the window, I can go ahead and do that back split stitch. So I'm going to start with 1 back stitch up to here, and then I'll come down here, and I will do my back split stitch. And then I'll go next to that and make a back stitch to here. And then I'll come up to the roof line. And do back split stitch to here. Come up right here. Oops. And then go up to the roof line. And then come down here. And back split stitch. As much as you can fit, once you start getting more and more towards the corner here, you may just end up filling out with some satin stitch. But if you can fit at least 2 stitch lengths in there to get that kind of textured back split stitch look, then I do recommend it. But for everything from right here, I'm probably just going to finish filling out this corner with satin stitch, since it's so tiny. And then I'm going to come back over here underneath the window and fill in with more of just a satin stitch again, since it's such a tiny space. And then when I get to this side, I can do a little bit more back split stitch and then finish out towards this side with just, you know, a little bit more of the satin stitch. Okay, before we fill in this section and this section, which are going to actually be greenery, we're going to fill in the siding that's around these round windows. And for that, you're going to use 3 strands of ecru, and we're going to do a vertical satin stitch. So again, I'm just starting off with that little straight stitch that's going to get completely covered up. And for this section, since it kind of works out towards these diagonal corners, I'm going to start in the middle of 2 windows. And I'm going to come up through the fabric and I'm going to pull my thread straight up. And this is going to help me with direction. So I can see that I have it nice and straight vertically here. And then I'll make a down stitch right underneath where my thread ended up. And now I have a good starting place. So I can work towards either side. I'll start working towards this side. So I'm going to come back down to the bottom, come up right next to where I came up for that first stitch. And I'm going to make my down stitch right next to where I made my first down stitch. come back down to the bottom, come up right next to the previous stitch, and then go back down right next to opposite that side. Now once you get to the window, I think I'm going to be able to fit one more in here. One more little stitch. Now I'm just going to be filling in above and below the window. So I'll start down here on the bottom and I'll just go up to here. And I'm going to do all the way below the window first. Just go up to wherever you meet the stitches of the window. And so I would continue going all the way under here. You'll also do the same thing for above the window. And then once you get all the way here and you've filled out everything above and below the window, you can lengthen your stitches back out and finish satin stitch. You'll just gradually shorten the length of your stitches as you work into this little corner. And then you can come back over here and complete all of the siding going this way. Okay, we're going to fill in these two sections now, which are actually going to give the appearance of kind of like greenery draped over the cabin. So you're going to take all 6 strands of 520, and what you're going to want to do is what's called the loop stitch. So I'm using my needle that has a little bit of a larger eye here, just because it's a bit easier with all 6 strands. And I'm going to start by coming up through the fabric, just anywhere kind of in the interior of this first wide section. And you're going to want to make a down stitch about a stitch length away. And you're going to begin to pull through, but you're not going to pull all the way. You're going to want to leave it up a little bit so that it creates kind of a loop or an arch like that. Now you're going to come up a little bit close to that first stitch and come up through the fabric again. It doesn't matter where, just anywhere kind of close. Oops, I just pulled that flat. So I accidentally pulled that too flat. So if you do that, you can take your needle and run it underneath and sort of pull it back up again. So you can see it's back up again. And now I'm going to make another little loop. I'm going to come back up through the fabric. This time I'm going to weave one loop over another one. So I'm going to pull. Now you want to be careful when you're pulling up through the fabric for your next stitch. You want to go just until the thread hits the back of the fabric. You'll be able to feel it when you're pulling. If you pull too tight, I'll show you, you're going to flatten out your previous loop. And if you do that on accident, like I said, you can always go through with your needle, get underneath that loop and pull it back up a little bit. So now I'm going to actually make this loop go over this one so that they're overlapping. That's what's really going to give us the volume and the texture that we want in this stitch. And you're just going to continue making loops like this that are all different directions. They're going to be weaving over, through, under each other. And you can kind of work into the siding but above and below as well. So like this stitch, I'm going to make it kind of go into the siding here. Sorry, my camera's being tricky right now. Okay. Yeah, it's better. And you'll see as you just continue to make your loops that you're going to begin to create this really lovely greenery texture with this beautiful evergreen color. Again, there's really no right or wrong way or place for you to be making each next stitch. I just kind of keep them grouped together so I can sort of just make sure I'm covering all of the white space with these loops. So hopefully this gives you a good idea. You can come up through another loop and fill into a blank spot. Just remember to keep trying to kind of cross them over one another. That's what's really going to build them up and give them that 3D look. And it's just going to give you even more texture. So you can kind of see how that's going to start to come together. And I'm just going to continue to fill that in all throughout this section, and then do the same thing for this a little bit smaller section here as well. And then once you have that done, we will move on to the next step. Okay, I've got all my greenery filled in. I'm going to come in with 3 strands of 8/16 now, and I'm going to fill in every other little rectangle here with a vertical satin stitch. Or I say vertical, but I guess really you're going to be following kind of this diagonal direction that we see on this roof line. So again, I'm just starting with a little bit of a straight stitch in the middle here. And now I will go ahead and start right here and fill in across. And then just get that all satin stitched in. Sorry, something got caught there. So I'm going to continue and just get this all filled in from the exterior roof line towards the interior. Once I get this one done, I'm going to complete that. I'm going to repeat that same thing on every other one. So I'll do this one, and this one, and this one, and this one, and then this one, this one, this one, and this end one over here. Once you've stitched in all of the red ones, you're going to do the exact same thing on all the remaining sections with 3 strands of 647. So you're just going to satin stitch following the line of the section. When you get to this section here, I like to start in the middle with a vertical line right here, and then fill in on either side of that going down like so. Okay, we're going to add some French knot snow down here at the bottom of the house. I like to do 3-wrap French knots, but you could, I like my snow to be a little bit on the chunkier side. You'll kind of see in this one. But you could do 1 or 2-wrap if you wanted the snow to be daintier. So I'm using 3 strands of ecru, and I'm going to do 3-wrap French knots. So for a French, okay, so to make a French knot, you're going to hold your needle horizontally underneath the thread and wrap it around 3 times. Once, twice, 3 times. And then I'm going to angle my needle back down right next to where I came up through the fabric, not down the same exact hole, but right next to that hole. You're going to push your needle vertically down through the fabric. With my non-stitching hand, I'm kind of pulling that thread tight so that I don't lose that knot. And I'm going to pull my needle through from underneath. I'm still holding with my non-stitching hand until I get really close, then I can let go and complete that knot. And then I'm just going to move a little bit next to that one and make another one. 1, 2, 3, angle it down, push it down through there. Whoops. Coming. Okay, there we go. And you're just going to simply cluster these, kind of following, this is just an idea to give you sort of how the snow is spilling out in front of the house. So just follow it as best you can. And you're going to fill in this whole area with a cluster of French knots. You could also vary the number of wraps. Like if it comes out here to the edge, I might just do a 2-wrap French knot, just for some variation, to have some smaller ones. Whatever you think. So I'm sort of just following the lines here. The nice thing about when our French knots are all clustered together is that if you're just learning how to do them and they don't look perfect, which my French knots never look perfect. They're always different sizes, and sometimes they're messy, sometimes they're tight. But anyways, if you're still learning how to do them, They're all going to be bunched up together, so you won't really be able to tell if one of them doesn't turn out just how you want it to. Anyways. So you're going to get this whole area filled in. It'll take you a little bit of time. So just settle in. And then once we're done with that, we just have to add on our beads. Okay, next we're going to add in one of our bright gold beads where every dot is. We're basically like in the middle of each of these sections. So I got one strand of the ecru thread onto my beading needle, which is the really, really tiny eyed one. It can take a few tries to get that one strand through there, so just be patient when it comes to that. You're going to come up to the fabric right to one side of the first dot here, and you're going to get one of your gold beads onto your needle. It's helpful to pour your beads into some kind of like shallow dish or bowl or plate so that you can grab them onto your needle, and then slide it down towards the fabric. And you're just going to take your needle and make a down stitch on the other side of that dot, which is about the width of that bead there. And once you pull through, it will anchor your bead right into place. I'm going to repeat that on the next section. So I'm going to come up right below this dot. I'm going to grab one of my gold beads, slide it down towards the fabric here, and make a down stitch just on the other side of that dot. And once I pull tight, my bead will be sewn into place. So you're going to repeat that for each dot that you see along this roof line. And then I have one more little thing to show you. The last thing I like to do is add one little bead towards the right middle of the door for the doorknob. So I'm coming up just about in the center, but towards the right of this door. And I'm going to get one more of those gold beads on there. And then again, there's no dot here, but you're just going to want to make a down stitch just the tiniest little stitch length away, about the width of the bead. Whoops. And that should anchor it right into place for you, so you have a nice little doorknob. And there we go, we're all done stitching. So make sure you tie this off really well, and then we'll go on to next steps. So now that we're all done stitching, you're going to want to wash away your stabilizer paper if you used that. If you trace to transfer, you can just skip this part. But you're going to want to run warm to hot water under your sink, and you're going to let that water the water pressure from the faucet dissolve away any remaining stabilizer paper. It takes about 20 to 30 seconds, and then you'll start to see this paper all dissolve away. Make sure you really run it into these detail areas, like on the inside of the window, and sometimes it likes to cling to like French knots or the edges, so you can always kind of take your finger and rub that away if it's clinging anywhere. Once you have all of the paper washed away, you're going to just set this down as is in its hoop and let it dry completely before we move on to backing it. Okay, what you're going to want to start by doing is unscrewing the top of the hoop and taking out your stitched fabric for just a moment. You can set it to the side. You're going to lay your inner ring down on a hard flat surface and take your pattern piece of backing fabric and turn it so that the pattern side is facing against the hoop. So upside down, like that. Then you can lay your stitched on fabric back on top and sort of feel around so that you can feel it press down around that inner ring. You're going to take your hoop, your outer ring, and press it back down around and make sure it's positioned exactly how you want. I'm going to move this just a little bit over. There we go. You're going to go ahead and tighten that screw up at the top again. Make sure it is nice and tight. If it didn't position exactly how you want it to, you can always take that outer ring off and just reposition it. Once you have it exactly how you want it and everything is tight and all the edges are pressed together, you're going to cut away all of the excess fabric. And you want to get as close to the back seam as possible. So it should look just about like this once you're all done. Next, you're going to take hot glue and you're going to begin at the top and slowly work around in small sections, putting the hot glue down. And then you can glue down the twine. Continue working all the way around in small sections. Once you get close to the end here, you can see how much excess you have and go ahead and just trim that away before you glue it down. Then you can finish off that last little bit. And there you go. We have a super cute backing to our ornament now. The last thing you need to do is add the ribbon. So you're going to push the chiffon ribbon through underneath the screw. It's helpful to use the tip of scissors or a pencil or pen to push it through until you can grab it from the other side. Then you're going to pull it through until the two ends meet, like so. Now I'm just going to go through and do a really simple knot up here. Usually just tie that 2 times to make it extra secure. And then I'll cut off some of the excess here. And here we go. It's ready to hang on the tree.